Welcome to the Top Order podcast. Coming at you from two hemispheres. Myself here in the Northern Hemisphere in Birmingham. The guys down in the newly appointed Top Order Towers at Baldwin Heights on the North Shore of Auckland. We're going to talk some New Zealand, India, Washington Sundar. Has he leapfrogged Axar? The emotional reactions to this New Zealand's greatest ever achievement. There's a question mark there as well. England and Pakistan, what have we learned? Does Bazball need another reset? And we'll also talk a little bit of India naming their Australian touring squad. All coming up on this multinational episode of the Top Order podcast, coming after the swish.
Well, I went a bit early with the swish there. Sorry, boys, that's on me. That's on me.
Well, look, we're going to have a few delays and technical errors. If anyone wants to have a little behind the scenes, it's just taken us approximately 22 minutes to set this up for a recording. Guys, I've got to start. We're a New Zealand cricket podcast, certainly from a majority locational perspective. Is this the best cricketing moment, Stu and Raj, since Gunn and Moore or Miller Champ and Hall got together to make cricket bats for you guys? A win on Indian soil?
It's amazing, isn't it? I'm still kind of speechless sort of thinking about it. I mean, I know that speechless is not ideal for a podcast medium, but, I'm sort of I'm still processing it, I think. And in a weird way, the sort of, I saw a lot of this is the greatest moment in Black Caps history when it happened last night, went online, wanted to see what everyone was saying really. And there was pretty much unanimous. People were saying, this is our best moment, the best thing that this side has ever done. And I still think a World Test Championship win, like an ICC trophy, is very, very hard for me to go past. But then I ran through the numbers, right? Like, you try and process this, okay, rationally, like, is this the greatest thing we've ever done? And we've beaten the best team in the world, like, in their home conditions, which is something no one had done for 12 years. Even before that, it's 20 years since Australia did it. We hadn't won a test there for 36 years, and we just won 2 in a week. Like, we've come off a 0-2 result against Sri Lanka. We've done the same against Australia before that, which kind of made it seem even more improbable that this would happen. And then you think, like, kind of the way that we've done this is even more remarkable, because I think we've won this series. It's obviously only been 2 tests so far. We've won these 2 tests in the way that I expected India to win them. We have gone about our business. We have, I will acknowledge that we've probably had the better of conditions, by bowling first in that first game and then batting first in the second game. But we've taken all our opportunities, and every time India's got ahead of, started to put some pressure on, we've just found a way to kind of get ahead and be ahead to the point where it seemed inevitable that we would win both tests. So, I think in some ways, like, New Zealand has never won a test series, I don't think, against the best team in the world in their own conditions until right now. So it's very, very hard to go past. I mean, pick up one, whatever you want, Raj.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to go down the path of what was the greatest moment in New Zealand cricket. There's been plenty of them, but this is right up there, mainly for the fact that this was Everest to us. This was, winning a test in India. No chance, and then let alone winning a series. That's not even close to being on the radar. But the way that we've done it, we've been dominant throughout all days of the test series so far. I don't know. I can't be any prouder of the boys. Maybe we need to take a little bit out of the book of the Australians and the English on this podcast when they talk down about their team maybe not being able to win a game. That's what we were doing, and they've completely proved us wrong.
They have. I mean, Binksy, Baldy. I mean, I like, it feels. I guess on that question, it feels a bit kind of like, is this embarrassing that this is, that we're talking about this as the best moment in Black Caps history, because it's just a test series. I know it's not just a test series, but maybe you kind of get the gist of what I mean there, Binksy.
Yeah, look, it's a phenomenal effort, and I think. I don't think you are overreacting. I do think that this is amazing for New Zealand cricket, particularly after the performance and your guys' disappointment with the Sri Lanka series. We talked a lot about this. You expected to go and win there and obviously didn't. And then to bounce back and win, 2 test matches. I guess that, this again leads into, for me, why we need longer series as well. So, you're 2-0 up in a 3-match series. I think it would be awesome for you to go and win that third test match, which starts in a 4 or 5 days time, so that you can say it's 3-0. It doesn't matter if there was another 2 test matches after and it's 5 tests like the Border-Gavaskar or England versus India. We've won 3. It would have been 3-2. We've gone and won that ultimate series away from home. But we've talked a lot on the podcast about this. I think we fluctuated a little bit, Michael, between whether India or Australia are the toughest places to go and win away. But I think particularly when you take into account the conditions, the fact that, New Zealand's seamers only bowled 3 overs in that second innings, it was obviously a very, very spin dominant test match. No, you are absolutely right to be at the top of Manly. Go and get a New Zealand flag and jump on Baldy's ceiling and fly it high and proud. Absolutely amazing achievement, and certainly has got to usurp that asterisk on that Cricket World Cup for you, hasn't it?
Jeez, we don't. Come on now.
Acknowledge the asterisk. Yeah. That's all I heard.
Yeah.
Acknowledge the asterisk.
Yeah. Baldy, anything to add? Otherwise, I'm keen to kind of talk about kind of how we did this, because we've for years, 12 years, obviously, we've been sitting here talking about how difficult it is to go to win in India, and how what a good side they are, and kind of the way that you can actually go about doing this, because no one has really been able to find a formula until now.
Well, let's get in and break it down, because I think there's a lot of overreaction that's happened in the last 24 hours after the second test. There was a lot of overreaction that happened after the first test. But let's break it down and try and put some facts into proceedings and have a look at what did New Zealand do better than anyone to get themselves into a winning position in both tests in this series.
Well, I think, like I said before, there's no, I'll say it right up front. I have no qualms that we had the better of the conditions. But, in the first test, we were given the better of those conditions by Rohit Sharma winning the toss and saying we'll have a bat. So, that aside, I think what we've done is one, we've taken our chances. Aside from Blundell, we've been absolutely brilliant in this series in terms of the fielding that we've had. Took some absolutely brilliant catches in that first test. That we think about this test that's just gone. The Santner run out was huge. We took, Daryl Mitchell was flawless at slow. I think he missed a couple of tough chances, but he was very, very good at slip. Took some really good ones. And then I think we've got to talk about some of the stuff we talked about in the preview of this series, in the tempo that we've played our cricket. Because, Raj, you and I were talking in that episode and going, like, how can we actually bat against this Indian bowling attack and, go about scoring runs but not being reckless? And I think they've found that absolutely perfect tempo to go, well, we can just, knock it around. We don't have to run up and down and try and hit boundaries. I think they've learned from Bazball in the way that they were able to play some different shots, the reverse sweeps and the sweeps. But the way they've actually gone about accumulating runs, I think, has been one of the keys to the way that they've won these 2 tests.
I 100% agree with everything you said there. The one I want to focus in on is the batting. Our plans, especially to the spin bowlers, have been evident. It's something that we've really, really thought about before going into this test series, and we've just executed. That's been the other side of it. Having a plan is great, but being able to execute it is the sort of 75% of that. And the tempo that we have batted at has been perfect. A couple of times I heard Ian Smith on commentary mention 7 off the over without a risk, sort of things like that. Really, I'm just so impressed with the way that they've gone about their cricket. They've really attacked Ashwin as well, which I found very interesting, especially with the number of left-handers that we've got in our top order, that we have gone after Ravi Ashwin probably predominantly out of all of the spin bowlers that have been on show. But again, just echoing the points that you said, we did have the best conditions for the batting and the bowling across both test matches, but we completely took that with both hands. We won every moment that was up to be won. And the fielding, that was the major thing that we were missing when we went to Sri Lanka. We were dropping catches left, right and centre. The real exclamation was that run out of Rishabh Pant yesterday by Santner. That was incredible. what do they say in the NBA? Know your personnel.
Mhm.
They didn't know that Mitchell Santner was running to his left and be able to get that in as quickly. And I think we've been great in every facet of the game.
Binksy, do you want to add anything on the batting side? Because certainly, I mean, you can pick up on it, but Latham's innings, I think, in that second test here, the second innings of the second test, I think that's the best I've ever seen him bat, potentially. I know he's got hundreds, but just the way he sort of went about things and his demeanour in that innings, I think he just had this. It felt like he was calming everyone else down because they knew, okay, we've got to get to kind of 250 or something, and then we'll be in a really dominant position. And the way he, played Ashwin and Jadeja, and I just thought it was so well done. And I think maybe you want to pick up on how how they might have taken something from the way England tried to play against those Indian spinners.
Yeah, look, I think from a batting perspective, what I took away, number one, I think the Top Order podcast has really helped this Black Caps team. We put a little bit of moz on Tom Latham as standing captain, or new captain, I suppose. We put a little bit of moz on Devon Conway and asked the question around his form as well. And we've talked a lot on the podcast about how good Rachin Ravindra can be as well. And I think when you look at those three guys and their performances to set that tone, and just to pick up quickly on a point Raj made about the conditions and New Zealand having the best of the conditions, we'll probably come on and talk a little bit later about England and Pakistan, where England in this most recent third test match, had the best of the conditions because they won the toss on a pitch that had heaters and fans and rakes and JCBs, and it had been set fire to and all kinds of stuff. They didn't take advantage of those conditions. So I do think that playing in the subcontinent or playing anywhere really where there is a condition that favours you, whether it's first morning at Lords where it's going to nip around a little bit, or the fact that you've won the toss on a pitch that's going to deteriorate, you have to make that count. And New Zealand have certainly made those passages of play count throughout the course of this series. But I'll throw it back with a question to you guys. And Rachin Ravindra and Devon Conway have had pretty decent IPL stints in recent history. Has that unlocked the ability for this batting lineup to come and be successful in India? And will there be a little bit of a BCCI towers, limiting overseas players or something like that in future issues of the IPL? But look, in all seriousness, has that preparation, do you think, helped those guys? We've talked a lot about Devon Conway's form in recent times, and he's come good alongside Rachin, alongside Tom Latham, as well as a cast of others in this series as well.
Well, I think it hasn't hurt them. Has it helped them? It probably has a little bit, but obviously it's a very different game they've been going over there to play. I think, we talked last week about Rachin Ravindra and how he had prepared coming into the Afghanistan test match in India before this series. He prepared to play red ball cricket, to play against spinners on different types of soil in India. I think I don't see not having exposure to the conditions being an excuse for anyone anymore. We get around the world so much, playing so many different areas different conditions against so many different opposition. Not knowing the conditions or what you're going to come up against, I think, is a lot less of an excuse. Everyone's exposed to it now.
And you can choose to do the work. Rachin Ravindra clearly chose to do the work. He chose to send himself to India. He chose to expose himself to those different conditions. He was innovative in his approach, and it just shows in the growth of his cricket. I want to call out a couple of players. I want to call out Glenn Phillips's lower order runs. Again, 48 not out, important runs batting with the tail, as well as Will Young. Binksy mentioned that we've put a bit of moz on a couple of players in this podcast. Prior to this test series, I think we commented that we know what we're going to get from Will Young. I think he's over-delivered against expectations of him in this test series. And I think, as well as anybody, he has equipped himself to be the next man up in this New Zealand team and showed actually that he's got a bit of bottle. I want to give Tom Latham a lot of credit in terms of the mentality that he showed. You talked about it, Stu, in terms of the way he went about his batting. That has 100% rubbed off on the rest of the players in this team. It reminds me very much of an Alan Border style captain's knock. I'm going to place a high value on my wicket. I'm going to show you how it's going to be done, and everyone follows along with me. When we previewed this test series, we said someone had to stand up and bat for long periods of time and everyone bats around them. Tom Latham, I think, did a fantastic job in the second innings of this test, but at different times in the first 2 test matches of this series,
people, right?
we've had different people step up and play that role. The only one I think we haven't seen a lot from yet is Daryl Mitchell, and you just know that with a quality cricketer like him, an innings is going to be around the corner. So there's a lot to like from this top 6, top 7 in this New Zealand setup at the moment.
And I think to pick up again on what you guys are saying, I think actually they've been really good tactically. You have to come with a plan. You have to know what you're trying to do. And while I still actually do have some questions about the likes of Blundell and the likes of Phillips and even Mitchell to a degree, he's looked, really twitchy. He often looks twitchy. Like he tries to come down the wicket. He tries to sort of dominate the bowl. Is not necessarily the right word, but he's trying to put the bowlers. He's trying to dictate terms, I guess, is more of what I mean, that he's trying to set the tone for what's going to happen. But I think that certainly that top order, Latham, Young, Conway and Ravindra, those 4 guys have had really clear plans on what they were going to do. They obviously came into this series and knew this is how we are going to approach this series and how we are going to approach all of these individual bowlers. And they've, like you said, they've gone about and executed that plan perfectly.
A real sort of contrast between the innings is how many runs were scored behind square by the New Zealanders. It seemed like a lot of their runs, a lot of boundaries as well, were coming from the little tickles round or the reverse sweeps or the late cuts or whatever it may be behind square. In contrast, when the New Zealanders were doing it, they had people in that position and you had to score runs down the ground or had a really hard square past the sweepers. But I guess we'll come back onto that a little bit more later with our strategic talk.
On moving on to I suppose another aspect of how we have won this series. We've got 20 wickets in both tests, and we've done it in very, very different ways. Obviously, the first test it was all about the seamers. This test it was all about one of the more unlikely people that that I don't think anyone predicted to absolutely dominate this series. Baldy,
predicted him taking 13 wickets.
Throw it to you, Mitchell Santner, 13 wickets. What an absolutely brilliant performance!
Let's go back to the beginning of the Sri Lanka series
run the tape
and say. What would Mitchell Santner be able to do in those conditions? And it was he's going to dump the ball into the right areas. He's going to ask the questions of the batters in front of the wicket, stump to stump, and he's just going to continually vary his pace subtly and do different things and ask the wicket to do favours for him. And the wicket has done some favours for him in this test match, but what he did better than anyone is he dumped the ball into the right areas and consistently asked questions of the Indian batters. Now, sometimes you're going to get luck. Sometimes the best batter of a generation is going to miss a full toss and get bowled. But he asked enough questions of the batters, just as Ajaz did when he took those 10 wickets for New Zealand, asked enough questions of the batters that good things happened for him. And that is the formula for Mitchell Santner to be successful. Yes, he needs some help, but he's always there and thereabouts.
And Bordy, to pick up on that, that's also the formula for any visiting spinner, I think, going to India now. England did it last winter. They sent Tom Hartley, who hasn't been seen since for England, but someone that was going to do exactly what you just described, which is put the ball in the areas that Akshar and to an extent Washington Sundar did in this test match as well, and ask questions at the right pace. And Lippy's probably the best man to talk about the skill and the guile and the finger spin component of that. But he has obviously taken on board a lot of feedback, again, from his IPL stints, and B, from watching how other spinners have gone and done this. And yeah, look, you cannot sniff at 13 wickets in a test match, can you?
Oh, I mean, it was absolutely tremendous. And I think, as you just said, Binksy, there is a lot of skill around what he did. You're not selling him short by saying that he did what was required in terms of putting it in the right place, because that was a huge component. And if we look at the other spinners, certainly from a New Zealand point of view, that's what they didn't manage to do. They didn't manage to build that pressure.
Not often enough.
Yeah.
We got some terrific balls from Glenn Phillips, but he released the pressure often enough that you could negotiate your way around the good ball because you weren't under pressure to score off the good ball. You could wait for the bad one.
Totally. But I think what Santner did so well, one was he used the crease, fantastically. The way he changed his angles was just brilliant. He would move, he would go wide of the crease. He would then come straight and get high. And that changed the trajectory of the delivery. It changed how he was spinning the ball. It changed. You saw some were skidding on, some were going, some were turning big. And that's how you create wickets in these scenarios. That's how you create doubt. against the best players in the world, especially when they're trying to go at you. And I think the other thing he did fantastically well is what you mentioned before about his pace. Because, maybe we'll talk about Jaiswal soon, but the way Jaiswal came out in that second innings, or the fourth innings of the test, he had all of our bowlers absolutely terrified. He was just, he had me terrified sitting there because
we could tell.
yeah. When I was messaging our Slack channel going, look, what is going on here? But when someone is going hard at you, the temptation is to bowl faster. We have to skid it in, try and bowl T20 sort of areas, try and bowl, dot balls, build some pressure. But you had to be brave and slow it down because that pitch, I thought it was a great pitch, actually. I thought it, really offered enough for bowlers, but there were times when it looked really easy to bat as well. So it was a real challenge. It presented challenges to both sides throughout the whole test. But on that pitch, to create that extra, the extra energy and the extra doubt from the pitch, you had to bowl slower. When you were bowling faster, it was much easier to bat. And Santner was brave enough to realise that. They got to tee, and he realised that, and he came out after tee, and he varied his pace. He started bowling slightly slower, and then he bowled those quicker ones that got the edge, caught it slip. Yeah, I just thought it was a real skill performance from him, and I think you have to give him credit because he has, as much as he hasn't taken the wickets in Test cricket, as much as, whether he is going to be a useful Test cricketer or spinner around the world, who knows? We'll see what happens. But I think you have to give him credit because it is clear. We said it a few months ago, that it's clear that he's developed his game and he's developed aspects of his game to get more spin and to get more variety in the way he goes about things.
And that's to Adam's point to a T. I think the person who has benefited most from his IPL experience is Mitchell Santner, because he has developed a formula and a method that works in India. And it works for him in the IPL, limited opportunities, limited sample size, sure. But he has developed, I think, better than anyone, a way to adapt to those conditions.
Yeah. Do we want to talk a bit about India here?
Yeah, I was just going to segue to that. And look, I don't want to cut short the valedictory moments of a Black Caps victory in India. So if there's stuff that we want to come back to. But normally the way our run sheet works is we ask a bunch of questions. And I've got Washington Sundar. I've got, a little bit of conversation around Kohli and Sharma. But let's start with the ultimate question. How should we react to this defeat if we are India? And I guess you only need to jump on Reddit or Twitter. It's not been taken particularly well.
Yeah, look, again, I'm not ringing alarm bells or pushing that big red button at this stage. I think, it's a bad performance, but I do think that there is a trend all of a sudden starting to emerge because they didn't play well in that first test against Bangladesh as well. Remember, Ashwin and Jadeja sort of pulled them out of the mire there. So there's definitely some things to sort of have a look at and start considering. They've already picked their team that are going to Australia. So, any decisions that are going to be made will be made post that tour. Look, I think there are some questions that are starting to emerge that, have been papered over. Those cracks have been papered over by victory, the winning that India has been doing for a long time. Now with a couple of sort of shaky wins and then a very, they would say very poor performance by them in the last two tests against New Zealand. There's going to be some questions asked, I think.
Do you think they took New Zealand too lightly?
No, I don't think so. But I think the senior players for India didn't step up and perform in the way that the senior players, and I'm talking about Tom Latham here primarily, stepped up and performed against their counterparts. I think Latham has outpointed Rohit both in terms of captaincy and in terms of batting in this series, even though Rohit's got a 50 and looked very dangerous until he rolled one onto his middle stump. I think the Indian players, and I think the criticism from the Indian public and the Redditory and the Twitterati or the Xerati have focused primarily on those senior players not stepping up and delivering for their squad. We talk a lot about how the young players in India are driving their test side forward into the future. But the reality is that Kohli, Rahul and Rohit haven't played a senior hand in this test series. And in the past, they have. We've seen them dominate from those positions. And their lack of runs from a senior batting perspective has come back to bite them in this series. You're right, Raj. we've seen Ashwin, Jadeja, Pant, Akshar bat India out of trouble for a wee while now, and it might have papered over some of those cracks. They weren't able to do that in this series when India were under the pump. New Zealand really got on a roll. I think that will be the criticism that's levelled at a lot of those senior players, and it will be up to them to go to Australia now and respond to that. And it will be up to them, I think, career-defining moments for Rohit in particular, but also for Virat, and to see how he responds now being under pressure.
Can we talk about Virat Kohli a little bit? I'm a big fan of Virat Kohli. I don't know if you guys know that. I was shocked to see the sort of 5-year numbers on him that sort of have been doing the rounds in the social media sphere. Just not that one. I think it's that one there. Oh, a little bit further up. Might not be in that channel. Averaging 34 over 5 years with only 200s. Those are numbers that are a bit scary, and things that I in my head didn't actually acknowledge until I actually read through that and saw the people that they had compared them against with a similar sort of career. Which I talked about cracks. There is a massive fissure in that sort of 3, 4, 5, middle top order for India that has never really been there. They've always been very assured through that middle and top order. But now there's got to be some questions asked. I think Gill is a superstar and he's got a long future at number 3 or higher for India. But what does 4 and 5 look like at the moment? What does 4 and 5 look like for the future? It's not like, we're talking about when Devon Conway was struggling, there wasn't people pushing. There are people pushing right behind India, these players who are playing for India, that would be walk-ins to a number of different sides around the world.
Any other international squad.
So you've got to start looking at that. Questions need to be asked.
I think the Australian series becomes definitive. I really do. It is India's biggest away series, maybe other than going to England and winning. It is the one that they have highlighted and targeted for some time now in terms of their preparation. They need to come in and dominate Australia. They need to stand up to Australia and fight fire with fire. And I think a lot of that is going to come down to how Rohit treats those first 10 or 12 overs against Hazelwood, Stark and Cummins in this Australian series coming up. If those guys get on top of Rohit, I think, he's going to be 36, 37 now almost, and Kohli's 36 shortly. So these guys don't have a lot of time left in their international career to have another statement series against Australia. Yes, they've beaten them twice in recent times, but I think the calls for change are starting to get louder, not necessarily on this podcast, but externally to this podcast. The calls for change are getting louder, and these guys have got to respond. How they do it, I'm not really sure, because the other stat that flew out at me, Sachin Tendulkar has a more recent Ranji Trophy game than Virat Kohli, which is bizarre to me. Sachin played in 2013. The last time Virat played a 4-day game, a Ranji Trophy game, is 2012. So he's not, if time and history tells us anything, he's not going to go back and play 4-day cricket, even if he had the opportunity to. So he's going to have to go in and figure out a way on the fly to turn this form around.
But Binksy, 4-day cricket doesn't even matter, does it? England just picks all their players from they don't need to play county cricket.
Well, look, that's a really, really good stat, Baldy, but that shows that you can have a 11-year international career without playing first-class cricket, right? So all this talk about preparation is bullshit. He's got a career averaging over 50 during that period of time as well. But look, I agree, Australia's going to be big. They're not going to change personnel for that series. That isn't the series to throw 3 or 4 guys and have wholesale changes in a top and middle order. I think Kohli and Sharma get the opportunity to go and really help Yashasvi Jaiswal and help Rishabh Pant and help some of those other guys to navigate a series in Australia. And you wouldn't bet against them going and winning in Australia again. I don't think. I don't think it's alarm bell time. I think we talk a lot about the negatives of the team that have lost a series on this pod at times. I think we've just got to take a lot around the positives of the team that's won the series and have done the things and exploited the conditions and exploited the passages of play within the game. But yes. Will Young's stock has definitely gone up, and when you look at those 5 years numbers, Kohli's stock is trending down a little bit, isn't it?
It's not great, is it?
It's not great. Let's give India some credit. Sarfaraz Khan so far in this series hasn't had a great second test, but he's looked tremendous. Again, The young players driving India forward. Rishabh Pant has looked tremendous in the first 2 tests of this series. Tidy keeping as well, I think. But the guy I think who's come in and surprised everybody really is Washington Sundar. A surprise selection for me. I would have expected them to go with Akshar. I'm not sure if there's an injury or some other selection thing that's going on there, but they've picked Sundar. It seems now leapfrogging him ahead of Akshar, and he had a terrific test match.
Oh, he was fantastic, wasn't he? I mean, it's so unlikely when we were watching Santner and Sundar get 25 wickets between them out of the entire test. But I think again, sort of what he did really well is that he ran in and attacked the stumps. He bowled if you compared the way that Jadeja and Ashwin bowled, I think they showed some pitch maps at different times. He bowled, he made LBW and bowled his calling card, and he said, look, yes, you want to sweep, you want to do all these things. If you miss, then you're out. And those other two, I don't know that they quite got that to the level that he did. And you have to give him credit. He's both Santner and Sundar tall, quite tall bowlers. The way they have their arms up high, I think Sundar did that incredibly well. And going forward, yes, he's ahead of Akshar. He's got the performance. In terms of going to Australia, he's been there and got those great memories of performing in that series. I don't know that he's. I think Akshar is Jadeja, right? Like they're not necessarily a like for like replacement in terms of what I'm going to pick Washington Sundar and I'm going to pick Akshar Patel. I think probably they've gone and the thinking behind picking Sundar in this test, I would say, is because of our left-handers. The number of Ravindra, Conway. Latham, the important Santner, the important players that we have in our lineup were all left-handers, and I think the spinning away, Sundar, he got Ravindra with another one of those beautiful deliveries. Raj was like, when that happened to him in Sri Lanka, said, one of those once in a lifetime deliveries. It's happened to him again. Yeah. Perfect delivery. But yeah, I mean, huge credit to any of these guys, right? That you talked about all the depth that India has. Sarfraz comes in, scores 150, takes his opportunity. Sundar comes in, takes 12 wickets in the match, and actually looked great with the bat as well.
And that's his massive differentiator, is that he can bat in the top six. I first sort of noticed it, having not, only seen his sort of sporadic international performances. I noticed it in the IPL when they threw him up the order. He was able to go out there and score runs. He looked an assured batsman when he was out there. What did he come in, like 9 or 10 or something?
9 in that first innings and then 6, yeah.
And then they pushed him up the order and he didn't look out of place. So I think that puts him ahead of a lot of people, along with his ability to take wickets.
Do we want to talk about the implications of this result in terms of the World Test Championship? Because it really, like the first test, threw things a little bit, but this one has blown this World Test Championship wide open, if you ask me. I mean, it's now brought India right back down to where Australia are. We've got Sri Lanka and South Africa and even New Zealand. You're telling me there's a chance. There's a sniff here now for a lot of these sides that can go on. I think South Africa particularly is in a really nice position in terms of the teams they have to play and teams that they would go into thinking, we are favourites at the start of this test. But I mean, we were saying before, did India have one eye on the Border-Gavaskar? That Border-Gavaskar is going to be doubly important now for the way this World Test Championship unfolds.
Yeah, look, it is. I mean, the table has compressed itself quite substantially. You've got a number of teams now between 50 and 62% in terms of their win percentage. So that's really closed right up. If you have a look at the table, though, Sri Lanka and South Africa play each other next. Both of those sides are effectively running 50-50 throughout this series. You've got England then coming up against New Zealand in 3 tests. They're below 50%, but I think they'll back themselves to play well against New Zealand in New Zealand conditions. But now New Zealand are red hot. New Zealand are 5-5. They've got one more test against India in India. Then they get to go home and against England and go, right, we've got these guys in our own conditions. So teams sort of 3 through 6 are really eyeing off and hoping that Australia and India battle it out in a 2-2 type of series in Australia coming up in the summer. And this whole World Test Championship now has gone from being a 2-horse race with a possible also-ran to all of these other sides now feeling like they're in contention, and they should be in contention.
Binksy, anything else you want to add on this series, or are we about to go to England?
If we have to, Raj, have you got something you want to
just one thing. In the last test, we talked a little bit about Rohit Sharma and some of his decisions in the field. I thought this test also had some interesting sort of calls, especially in that second innings, I think. If I'm the Indian captain and I've got a brand new ball, there's sort of only one person that I'm choosing to put that ball in their hand right about now, even if it is for a short number, a few overs. I want to see what he can do with this new ball. And I was very surprised when I went to spin at both ends. And the other one I sort of pulled up was his field settings were a bit defensive, and I'm gonna say defensive, and I can see why he had sort of in-out fields for his spinners in that position, in the situation that they were in on that pitch. But I think was it Ravi? It might have been Ravi on commentary came in and said he thought it was too defensive. At least when they first come in, at least when we started off, you've got to crowd them. See what happens.
It's not like the way that India play, and I think that's where the criticism's going to come, right? India have played in a particular way that's worked so well for them for so long, and part of that is when you first come into bat against the Indian spinners, Ashwin and Jadeja in particular, there are men around the bat, you feel like you're under pressure, they crowd you physically, and they make it very, very hard to get away with any error. Any error, no matter where it is, in front or behind square, on either side of the wicket, gets punished because there are catching men. And when they go away from that, it is easier to get started. And the hardest thing in the subcontinent is to face those first 10 or 15 balls because you don't know what that ball's doing in 3 dimensions. So I think, some of the criticism is justified. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Indian public react to this situation. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the players and the coaching staff react to the situation as well.
I do think the way that New Zealand played, I mean, I was listening, I kind of got sick of the TV commentary, so I was listening to SENZ, the commentary there, which is sort of through TalkSport in this England as well. So you had, Jeremy Coney and Daniel McCarty here in New Zealand, and then you had the likes of Jared Kimber and stuff in the UK. So, really, really enjoyed listening to them. And Jared Kimber picked up on a stat about the sweeps and reverse sweeps that Ashwin and Jadeja, I think they've been reverse swept, I think he said, 119 times this year. Before that, this year, the most they had ever been reverse swept in a year was 30 times combined. So, I guess they are having to adjust to a new way of people trying to combat them. And also probably Rohit Sharma is. He's probably thinking, okay, well, now I have to have someone at, deep backward point because, right-handers are trying to reverse sweep every single ball instead. So, maybe that's slow, maybe was quite slow to adjust to that. But, I think, as Binksy said, I really do think we have to give New Zealand a huge amount of credit for the way they've gone about this and actually, like I said, dominated this series. Obviously 2 tests only so far, but dominated this series in the way that I expected India would. Moving on.
Let's move on, and not too far away, but let's go to Rawalpindi and talk about England, Pakistan. So series loss for England, 2-1 series lost. And look, there's a bunch of stats out there, particularly in terms of probably the runs scored by England. 820 odd in that first test, and then they've not even got to that total in the next 4 digs, have they, almost? So, look, abjectly poor performances from England, I think, would be the way I'd sum things up in these 2 tests. But also to give some credit to Pakistan, and I know we've got some questions in there around whether they've unlocked a formula for playing at home. With the I guess the pitches is not, this is not a whinge about the pitches, but I think they've decided that that's the best option for them. So really interested to get your boys' take on really, how big a deal this is for England and for Pakistan as well.
That was your question in there, Bordy, about, have Pakistan unlocked this formula? And obviously we gave Sajid and Nauman a lot of credit in the last podcast, and I think they've certainly, maybe even done a better job in this test in terms of the way they ran through England in that second innings. But do you think, because they, again, they went out and on paper at least dropped their 3 best players, to go out and play in this style. You think this is something they should carry forward?
Well, I think the question you've got to ask yourself is what's the best avenue for Pakistan to take 20 wickets in their home conditions? And if you have a look at their personnel on paper and you have a look at the talent that's available, you have a look at their seam bowling stocks, and you would think that they're better equipped to take 20 wickets with their seam bowlers. But I think if they're producing the wickets that we saw previously in the last 2 or 3 years, and we've seen a lot of runs scored, not a lot of wickets taken, that avenue has clearly not worked for them. So credit to them. They've tried something different. They've listened to the Top Order podcast and played the second test same as the first. And then they've gone and replicated those conditions with some drones and helicopters and fans and
big
also
fans.
Big fan. We look, I'm a big fan of the fan because if anyone can get it to turn with a big fan, I could get it to turn with a big fan. But I think if they look at it objectively and they go, what's our best opportunity to take 20 wickets? Whether or not you think that Sajid Khan and Nauman Ali are as talented a set of bowlers as Saq Lane or as Mushtaq in the past, or even as talented as some of their seam bowlers are now, they have developed a formula where they can take 20 wickets at home and seem to be able to combat the opposition adopting similar tactics or having similar spinners in their arsenal. Because I think there's a lot of bright future ahead of Shoaib Bashir and particularly Rian Ahmed when he comes to the subcontinent. And we know what Jack Leach can deliver. So it's not like England brought no spin to the party, but it just seemed that Pakistan have found a formula that works for them. And I wonder if it's not going to be as exciting maybe as other brands of cricket, perhaps for the viewer in Pakistan, but it is successful. And what do Pakistan cricket fans love more than anything else? They love their team to be successful, right? So I think, they're going to look at this formula and wonder whether or not it's going to be a key for them going forward.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You can look at that question from a couple of different angles.
You can.
If I think about Pakistan, I think that this is probably what they should have been doing, not necessarily having fans and breaks and all these other things that we've sort of heard, but having pitches that spin. Over since their sort of reintroduction into having the home tests, all of their pitches have been like State Highway 1, absolutely flat. And that suits a lot of teams that actually tour there, the likes of Australia and England with this sort of batting lineup. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder if their reintroduction to cricket, they were so concerned about producing or having a reputation for producing poor wickets that they wanted to produce the best batting surfaces that they could and show that they could produce great cricket wickets. And I think maybe they went too far in that direction. They've pulled it back the other way now. Maybe there's a balance in the middle, but this is certainly a better avenue to take 20 wickets than a road.
More successful, definitely. And I asked the question again to Binksy, how are England going to take 20 wickets going to Pakistan? Pakistan had the same question. They figured that out for the last two tests. They're like, this is how we are going to take 20 wickets and take them at an economy there. So, look, I think it is a formula that they can look to do. What will come with that is teams, like New Zealand, having plans when they're coming there. I don't think England planned on playing on pitches like this. Not to say that they shouldn't have been able to adjust, but I think their game plan would have been very different going into day one first test than going into day one third test.
Yeah.
What do you make of it from Binksy from an England point of view?
Yeah. My take is probably slightly different, right? So I think the question that was posed in the Slack channel is, have Pakistan found a formula for success at home? Is this sustainable? Was the question that was written in there. Very, very articulate question. And I think in terms of, I would rephrase that and maybe look at it in a slightly different way. Have they been smart enough? And I think the answer to this is yes. Have they been smart enough to think of a formula for success at home against this England team? And then what will be interesting for me is what is their formula for success against who they're playing next. So I think that they have seen what's happened in the first Test match with England on a pretty flat pitch, being able to do the Bazball that the press would have you believe it is, which is to score lots of runs at a very, very quick rate. And they've said, right, what we need to do is we need to be prepared to slow that rate down, to frustrate the hell out of England. And then when we bat, we just need to be able to play a look. I don't want to necessarily disparage it, but an old-fashioned way of playing. They've played it well under 4 and over, if not under 3.5 and over across the course of these two Test matches. England have still scored at 3.7 and 4 in their first innings in these two games. but they haven't been able to score enough runs. So I think what Pakistan have done has been very, very clever. They've actually picked away. They've still got Shaheen Shah Afridi. They've still got Muhammad Ali. They've still got all these other guys that they can now bring back in if they're playing against teams on better pitches where their seamers are a better option to help them take 20 wickets. They can now obviously augment that with with the spin that we've seen in this series. So for me, the question is, have they unlocked the tactical analysis to be able to apply that against whoever they play? And then from an England perspective, the question for me is what has this done to the way England are going to play cricket? Because I think teams are now. And look, they were doing it already, right? But you're going to now think to New Zealand. What pitches are you guys going to produce to kind of nullify Bazball, if you want to call it that, or what's the tactic going to be? And the difference is New Zealand have got a seam attack that in New Zealand or English conditions is probably very similar to England's. We've probably both got a question mark around whether or not we play a spinner all the time. And then we've also just seen that, your batting's kind of come back to life. So this raises questions for me around how teams are going to set up to play against England.
I did see that there'd been some industrial fan orders down there for the South Island for later on in the year. So maybe you've got something there, Binksy.
Man, that's just a heat Christchurch in general. It's bloody cold down there, yeah.
Right. In terms of England's personnel, how have you? What stood out to you from their performances? Probably particularly over the second and third test, but for the whole series for you?
Yeah. For the whole series, look, I think probably it's about the question marks more than anything. The question marks for me are Ollie Pope. And that's probably about it, to be perfectly honest. I think if I look at Jamie Smith's had another pretty good series. He's missed a couple of tough chances, but keepers are going to do that in the subcontinent. I think obviously, Duckett continues to go about his business. Joe Root, Gus Atkinson was good again. Bryden Cast, I thought was very, 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 very good in that first test match and showed a little bit of promise with the bat. As well. And then, you guys have touched upon it. I think we've got a little gem in Ryan Ahmed if he can get enough cricket. But the reality is, he's probably 2 or 3 years away from playing all conditions for England as that single spin option. But again, I've been impressed with Bashir. But the big thing for me is a question mark around Ollie Pope. And also a little bit of a question mark about the batting form of Ben Stokes as well. Not scored 100 for a little while now. I am in England, so I'm going to say this really, really quietly. I don't think there's any calls for his head just yet. But when you've got a lack of runs at 3 and at 5 in your order, and particularly when you're trying to maybe bat Jamie Smith at 6 on occasions. Does that leave you a little bit weaker from a batting perspective? It sounds as if the press, certainly the comments in the press, Brendan McCullum, Ollie Pope's a fantastic player. When he gets in, he goes big. We have no question marks around him for New Zealand. I don't expect us, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't expect us to see any changes to that top 6. We will see a change to that batting lineup because I believe Jamie Smith's going to go home for the birth of his first child at some point, either the first or second test, which means there will be a change there. And Jordan Cox likely to come in to that batting lineup. But Ollie Pope's my big question mark. Personally, I think it's time for him to have a little bit of time away from the side. And I'd be looking at someone else to come in, come into that side. But I don't think it'll happen.
Binksy, a lot have been talked about on this pod around the personnel. What about the strategy? What about the mentality of Bazball? I mean, I know people talk about it a lot. I feel like if you're going to live by that sword, you're going to sometimes die by that sword. And that kind of is reflected in the World Test Championship standings for England. But in your view, is there a subtle adjustment they can make to right the ship going forward? in terms of their batting strategy?
Before Binksy answers, can I get your view on that? Because it was your question in there about, does Bazball need a rethink? I do want Binksy to follow, but I feel like you have thoughts on this.
No, I wanted to ask Adam around this, and I'm happy to follow up his point of view with my own. But is there adjustment, or is there time to think about throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
It's a really, really difficult one because we're looking at it as outsiders and we don't know what the instructions are, and we don't know what the way that this is being sort of portrayed to the team is. What they would have you believe is they say to everybody, you make your choice around how you go out and play. And as long as that is taking the positive option, we're pretty comfortable with how you do that. You look at someone like Joe Root. Joe Root has probably taken the GST off the way that he's played over the course of the last 12 months compared with the first 12 months of Bazball. Yes, he now gets that reverse ramp out, but he gets it out when he's already got 100 or when it's absolutely flat, right? Yeah. But you've got other players that I think Ben Foakes is a prime example. They have decided that he cannot play in the way that suits this style. So they are picking cricketers that they want to go out and play in this particular aggressive style. And they are saying that you can't do it if you do it in a more conventional, accumulative, if that's a word, way. So to answer the question, Bordy, is there a subtle adjustment required? I believe there is, because Pakistan helped to give them that blueprint. They helped them to go, do you know what? You are going to have to wait. You are going to have to maybe score at 3.5 and over instead of 4.25 and over in order to get a score of 350, 400 on the board. You can get 270 at fours, or you can get 350, 400 at 3.5s. What's going to win you a game of cricket? And England have decided that they think if they keep going, they might end up with 500 at fours. And it hasn't worked for them in this series. So, yes, I think they do need a subtle adjustment. But again, I don't think it's going to come. I think they're going to continue, to paraphrase what Baldy said, they're going to go shit or bust, or live by the sword, die by the sword, whatever, however you want to describe it. And I don't think that that's going to work in all conditions. And if you're an England fan, you're going to just have to put up with 112 all out occasionally.
I couldn't agree more. It's the exact set of thinking that I went through when I was thinking about this test in Pakistan. England have decided that there is one way forward for them, and that is attack as often as possible, and when in doubt, attack. And if you're in trouble, we'll attack. I don't think there's a mentality that they're prepared to bat a session at threes, or to give the opposition half an hour to an hour of being dominant and ride that pressure out and then switch gears and go back. I think if England are going to be super successful in this Bazball mode, if they can adopt that mentality of absorbing a bit of pressure from the opposition and then counter-punching, they are going to be so much more dangerous than they are at the moment. The World Test Championship stats, and I know they're not everything. I know you used the bikini analogy last week, Raj, on the pod, and it's a great one. I wish I knew who came up with it. In that those results will tell you that this is our way of playing cricket, but it's at the moment, it's not the optimum way of playing cricket in all conditions. Let's face it, when the ball is straight up and down, Bazball will dominate you. The ball was straight up and down the first test, England scored 800. The ball was straight up and down last year or the year before when England were in New Zealand, and they murdered that New Zealand attack. But when the ball is doing something, I think there's another gear to Bazball, which is to absorb that pressure and then counter-punch when the opportunity presents itself. And that's what makes England such a dangerous side, is they're already successful, but they've got a way to go.
But I guess that's my question. This is not for me saying that I think they're going about things the wrong way, but I guess where does the line be drawn between this is how we play cricket and I'm just going to, every time we fail, we can say, well, this is how we play, or that's actually just not smart. Like, you're not smart tactically, and you actually need to be thinking about okay, well, this isn't going to work in this scenario. We have to do things differently.
I don't think that you're going to be asking Crawley and Duckett to make those decisions. I don't think you're going to be asking Harry Brook to make those decisions. I think it's Joe Root.
But why not? Are they just not good enough?
No,
Why not?
No, I still think they're finding their way in the international game. And when you're finding your way in the international game, you've got to stick to a mentality and a method that works for you. And it's not until you get a bit older, like Joe Root is, like Ben Stokes is, where you start to realise that actually I can craft and mould my game into different conditions. Joe Root, ironically, has done it better than anyone, I think, in world cricket over the last 4 or 5 years. So I think he's the guy, rather than being on the outside looking in at Bazball, being able to go, guys, like, follow me a little bit here. And if you can bat with me for this session or session and a half, then we can unleash your attacking power in the back end of an innings when an attack is flagging and it's now 90, 100 overs old, and then you can go at 6s and 7s and 8s and you can get 800 in a test match, and you can do that on a more regular basis. I think that the only reason that we're being super critical is we can see what the potential is. And I think that England fans want to see their team live up to that potential every time. And it's not going to happen every time because occasionally you will fail. But I think if England can unlock just that little 5% extra in their batting, because we know that they can take 20 wickets. I've got no problem with the way that they're bowling. If they can unlock an extra 5%, they are primed to come to Australia and win the Ashes in Australia.
I do think, so I want to back up a point Binksy made earlier. I do think they're picking the personnel to play the style of cricket that they want to play.
Yep.
I think they've got other options to play a different style of cricket who would be better suited to those conditions. But then I will also say they have been learning. Like, even if you look back to the first test, I know the first test was on an absolute road. There was a stage there where they actually slowed down a little bit at the end of the day. They were able to have a partnership go through to the end of the day, allow their bowlers to have the night off, bat a little bit in the morning, and then go forward. So I do think that they are learning, but this is a whole new thing for Test cricket.
Yep, I take your point. And in fact, the Root and Brook, who made the big partnership? The Root and Brook partnership, when they were both kind of cramping, when they got to about 100, you kind of felt like one of them could, if they wanted to, just throw their wicket away with a bit of mental lapse, but they didn't. They pushed past that, and then that's the formula they need to unlock. Because, like I said, when they do that, they get 100.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's society's fault, right? It's we're in a generation, we're in a generation of after paying all kinds of stuff, aren't we? Why wait? Why wait a month for your new pair of trainers when you can put it on credit and have them now? And that's the way that England are playing their cricket. So, I don't think they're gonna change. And I guess as an England fan, you either strap yourself in for the ride, or you tune out. But I think at the moment there's enough credit in the bank that you've got some fantastic days Test cricket that you can remember back to, that you're not going to tune out just yet. But I want them to be as ruthless with their selection as they are with their approach to playing this cricket. And I think keep blindly going with a guy that either scores 150 once a series and nothing else in between. I think it's time to kind of reward someone that's sitting on the outer and deserves their opportunity. Anything else on England Pakistan, or should we move on and wrap up on the squad announcements?
Can I just quickly say shout out to Saud Shakeel for his innings, because I thought he was fantastic, and I think he's been fantastic for his whole Test career so far. It's a short Test career, but I think the way that he played that innings was, we talked a bit about tempo. It was perfect, and he looks someone that's super organised. Every time I see him play, he just kind of knows what his plan is. He knows what he's trying to do. He hit in different areas of the ground. Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic innings, and the spinners are going to get all the credit for taking those. Well, they got 19 wickets between them again.
They got 39 wickets in the two tests.
Pretty good.
Between the two of them,
they did pretty well, But that was a very, very important innings from Saud Shakeel. Pakistan were in a little bit of trouble at different times during that innings, and he held it together and allowed those same two spinners to come in at different times and score some runs and chip in and get that total where they had a lead, to the point where, England really had to bat well in that second innings, and then they didn't. So
I think we have to give all the Pakistan batters in this series a lot of credit, because all the way up and down the order. We talked about their lower order contributions, but their top order have performed well in this series. We got 100 on debut from the guy, I can't remember his name.
Ghulam.
Thank you very much, Stu.
Yeah.
We got 100 for him at number 4. We got runs from Shakeel. We got runs from Salman Ali Agha.
Salmonella. It's a slip of the tongue.
Salman Ali Agha. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, that's made me very, very uncomfortable. But they've got runs from all of their top order. They've got runs from Shan as captain. You've in the same way that we gave New Zealand credit for a team performance in beating India, I think you've got to give Pakistan their batting unit a team credit for the way that they went about their business.
And I don't want to unpack this, but the selection process they went through to choose this team for the second and third, it's come up looking, as you said last week, looking Millhouse.
Their 28 selectors have done the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move on, and we've got some news closely linked to Australia. No, we're not talking about David Warner's leadership ban being overturned, but we have got
He's going to come back and play, isn't he? He's going to come back and play if they want him to.
Well, I think, to be perfectly honest, now that his captaincy ban's been overturned, why doesn't he come back, open the batting and captain, keep wicket, and maybe open the bowling as well? But no, we're going to talk about India naming their Australian touring squad, and this probably more notable for the omissions than the inclusions in this squad. Who wants to kick us off?
Yeah, I can go, because there were a couple of names that missed out that I thought were notable, but it's the inclusion of KL Rahul that I thought was an interesting one. He was dropped for this New Zealand series. We've brought in Sarfaraz Khan, who's been named in this squad as well. But I just thought it was interesting that they've brought he and Jarrell and Punt as the wicket keepers to Australia. Now, KL Rahul obviously also adds batting cover, but no room in here for Mayank Agarwal, no room in here for Ruturaj Gaikwad, who've both performed well for India A and C, not respectively. I think they play for the other teams, but they've been playing in that kind of India A to C tournament.
Other letters are available.
You're absolutely right. But yeah, just some interesting inclusions. But I thought those were the two names that jumped out at me as being potential top order players that could have got a Guernsey.
It's funny. I didn't think this squad was surprising at all. To be honest, I know that Akshar's not there. I think I'm sad not to see Shami there because I love watching him bowl.
And that's fitness, is it, presumably? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, well, he obviously couldn't make this series. It sounds like, you've got to come back and play a bit. Sounds like this is taking a long time.
They didn't want to try him out in Australia. Yeah, they wanted him to see if he could make this series and then take him.
Yeah. Well, he last played a Ranji Trophy game in 2013. So, yeah, I don't know when he's going to get some cricket.
I do think that's a question, though, because Siraj has struggled a bit recently in 2024. I still think he's a good bowler. I'm not, I don't think you need to throw him out of the squad. Akash Deep's shown signs. But, suddenly, if you're going to have all your seam attack and you don't have Shami, you do end up there with Bumrah and some unproven guys. So, I do think that's a big omission for them, unfortunately, because of injury.
Yeah, I do like the bowlers that they have chosen, though. They are on the faster end in terms of, rating. What was it? Speed equals ratings in terms of the speed gun there. So, look, they have picked fast bowlers who are going to be able to utilise the bounce and pace of the pitch. I think, in going back to your KL Rahul point, I think they've taken their reserve batsmen with them, whereas the reserve bowlers are the named reserves.
Yeah.
So those are all bowlers. So, yeah, I agree with you, Stuart. I'm not too surprised by who's in that side. It does make me wonder if they were to name the side now or after the next test, perhaps, if there would have been any different. I don't know.
I was surprised that they didn't include someone like Umran Malik or Mayank Yadav, a raw, out-and-out fast bowler to throw some cats amongst the pigeons against Australia, particularly if they get a fast bouncy wicket. I think the day-night test is going to be in Brisbane, so who knows what's going to happen there. But if they got a fast bouncy pitch in the new Perth Stadium, whether or not an out-and-out, like uber-quick bowler like Mayank Yadav, who set the IPL on fire last year, would have been potentially that kind of rogue selection that could give India a bit of an edge. So I was just surprised that they kind of went, not with some standard kind of selections, because, we haven't seen a lot of Harshit Rana and Prasadi Krishna. I think you're a bit of a fan of, Raj. You've mentioned him a few times on the pod. But, yeah, I just thought there might have been room for some for some left field selection there in the bowling unit.
And on the Australian side, Cameron Green, obviously a bit of a shame that he's, another stress fracture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big shame for him because he is going to be out for the summer. But I wonder if it's not a blessing in disguise. I think there's an opportunity here that we might start to see the emergence of one or two other players that are pushing for those all-rounder spots, get a bit of a Guernsey. Bo Webster has been pulling up trees with the bat and the ball in Sheffield Shield cricket for a while now. He's scored 100 and taken wickets so far in the Sheffield Shield for Tasmania. He is providing an almost irresistible case for inclusion in the squad. And I think he's the one that will be first in line now. I think he's gone past Aaron Hardy, who would, up until very recently, would have been the guy that would have been picked in a lot of people's selection books. But Bo Webster has done a lot of work to get himself in the frame for selection. What will be super interesting is the opening position, because if you look at the guys that were in the limelight prior to the start of this summer, Matt Renshaw hasn't scored any runs. Marcus Harris has scored some runs, but looked a bit scratchy. Cameron Bancroft can't buy a run now, despite having pulled up trees for the last 2 or 3 years. All three of those guys have gone off the boil right when Australia needed them to be right on the boil. Sam Constance has emerged as a smoky. We talked about him last year on the pod.
Oh, I love the look of him, and I hope they choose him. I don't know if he has to open the batting. I don't know what your thoughts are on Steve Smith and where he plays in the lineup. I'd love to see Sam Constance come in, Constance,
Yep.
come in and bat in another position. You know how I love bringing batsmen in at number 6 and pushing them up to where they eventually sit. But if he wants to open, that's another sort of conversation to have.
He's an opening bat, and I think if they're not going to go with the big three that they've already gone with, I think they will think about throwing Sam Constance in. The problem is he's only played a half a dozen first-class games. He's got 100 in each innings of that earlier game for New South Wales. He wears the right coloured cap, so that's good from a selection point of view. But there are other names that are starting to emerge. Nathan McSweeney is the Australia A captain, bats at 3. There's talk of maybe he will go up to open the batting. I don't think that's a great call. But it seems like Steve Smith is going to bat 4 this summer, which means that the spot is as an opening bat. And if the hype is to believed and Sam Constance is the future, then Australia might go and break with tradition and throw a 19-year-old kid with barely 10 or 12 first-class games into the fire against the best fast bowler in world cricket.
I think he can only play 8 before selection for that test.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
He's only eligible because he's playing an A game this week.
Yep, he's playing Australia this week.
Balder, the other one I saw that would be a bit of a bolter was there's some backing for Josh Inglis to open the batting as a potential David Warner-style biffer. Thoughts?
It's funny, isn't it? Because he's never opened at first class level.
No.
I think he bats at 6. He bats at 6
yeah.
for Western Australia and is very, very successful at it. Yes, he opens the batting in white ball cricket, and if that's the formula, then we may as well pick Matthew Short, or we may as well pick
Fraser McGurk.
We may as well pick Jake Fraser McGurk. I mean,
Chris
he's got
Gale.
just as Chris Gale, unfortunately, A, retired, B, not eligible, but all of those players have just as much 4-day first class top of the order batting chops as any of these other guys, right? So if Australia were going to do something completely left field and different, they would have done it prior to elevating Steve Smith into the role. I think what we've seen is that opening the batting is a very specialist skill set. If you've got top of the order, I mean, let's face it, David Warner, even though he didn't play a lot of first class cricket, was an opening batter. It just so happened that he was a dynamic white ball opening batter as well. So, I mean, who knows? I think it's very different facing a swinging red ball than a straight up and down white ball on a true surface. That's all I'm saying.
Just going back to Sam Constance, how much does age factor into that decision for you? I mean, Andrew McDonald came out earlier and he said, if he's good enough, he's good enough. It's sort of that was the sort of line that he was going down. How much do you factor age in?
I think that the thing that works in Sam Constance's favour is that he has no fear at this point in his career. He's burst onto the scene. It seems like from reports and from the way he goes about his batting that he is an uber-confident young fella and that he trusts his game. So that all works in his favour. What will not work in his favour is that he will never have faced before, as very few cricketers will have done on a domestic scene, a bowler of the quality of Jasprit Bumrah. And my concern is that if he gets worked over by Jasprit Bumrah and makes 10 low scores against India, we might not see him again until who knows when. It's happened to Australian cricketers before. It happened to Nick Maddinson. It's happened to a number of other top order players that have gone in maybe at the wrong time and been found out or found wanting, and then have to spend far too much time in the wilderness. So I think if he's old enough, he's good enough, sure. But I think if you're going to pick him, you're going to have to pick him for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and adopt the Steve Waugh mentality and go, it doesn't matter if you don't make 100 for 30 test innings. You are the guy to go forward and bat for the next 10 years for Australia. And you will be the guy who is still there when Khawaja retires. You will be the guy who is still there when Smith retires. You will be the guy who is still there when Labuschagne retires. You are our guy going forward. So picking him now forces you into a decision that says, effectively to me, you have to pick that guy going forward for the rest of his career, because it's going to do him no good to pick him for the India series and then go, actually, you got found out by Bumrah, you're in the wilderness for 2 or 3 years.
And I mean, come next year, if they decide to blood him in the Ashes, it's going to be just as much pressure as
exactly right. And that's the counterpoint, right? Is that he's going to have to make his debut at some time. It's either going to be against India or against England if it's in the next 2 years. So you may as well throw him in there now. And we do need an opener with some pedigree for when Khawaja retires in 18 months, 2 years from now as well. So you've got to get someone in there that's got a bit of a future. You know I love young cricketers, and you know I love getting them into the side.
Right. Is that our first Trans-Pacific podcast done?
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. There is some New Zealand ODI squads, but I'll get into them next week after we talk more Test cricket. Maybe we'll be talking a whitewash at the Wankhede next week, eh?
Yes. Well, whitewash at the Wankhede, and you can stick that one-day squad stuff on the Patreon, Stu, for subscribers. But yeah, it is good night. Well, I say good night and God bless. It's good morning and God bless from us here in the UK, but good night and God bless from the guys in Baldwin's Bar. In Whangaproa, Auckland. We'll see you next time on the Top Order podcast. See you later.